In the American imagination, few images are as powerful as the green and yellow tractor. It is a symbol of the heartland, of hard work, self-reliance, and a manufacturing prowess that fed the world. We were told that steep tariffs on foreign steel would rebuild American industry. We were told it was America first. The reality, however, is unfolding not in revitalized factories in the Midwest, but in brand new sprawling production lines in Mexico. What if the very policy designed to protect American manufacturing was the exact thing accelerating its departure? This is the story of the John Deere dilemma. It is the story of a policy of patriotism that created a perverse incentive. An incentive so powerful it forced one of America's most iconic brands to move production south of the border, specifically to bypass the very tariffs meant to protect it. This is not a political attack. This is not a defense of globalization. This is an economic investigation. We will follow the money. We will examine the trade law. We will connect the dots. We will answer one simple, critical question. How did tariffs on foreign steel end up crippling the American farmer? By the end of this analysis, you will understand the structural flaw in U.S. trade policy that is hollowing out American industry from the inside. And you will understand, with data-driven clarity, why the American farmer and the American factory worker are caught in the same inescapable and devastating double bin. Section 1, the policy and the price. To understand this dilemma, we must first go back to the policy itself. It began with Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. This provision, citing national security, allowed the administration to impose heavy, broad-based tariffs on imported steel and aluminum. In 2024, these tariffs were solidified and in some cases expanded, creating a virtual wall around the U.S. steel market. The stated goal was simple and, to many in the industrial heartland, deeply appealing. Protect domestic steel producers, giants like U.S. Steel and Nucor, from what was seen as decades of unfair global competition. The logic, as it was presented to the public, was straightforward. Tax foreign steel. Force American companies to buy American. Reopen the mills. Bring the manufacturing jobs home. And for the American steel industry, it worked, at first. With foreign competition effectively priced out of the market, domestic steel producers were no longer bound by the global price. They were free to raise their own prices, and they did, significantly. According to data from Steel Market Update and analysts at Bloomberg, at several points over the last 2 years, the spot price for a ton of hot-rolled coil steel, the literal building block of all heavy manufacturing, was 30, 40, and in some cases, even 50% higher in the United States than it was in Europe or Asia. The policy was a clear, short-term victory for American steel. But what happens when one of the biggest consumers of that steel is also an American manufacturer? Companies like John Deere, like Caterpillar, like CNH Industrial, they don't sell raw steel. They buy it. They buy millions of tons of it. Suddenly, the cost of their single most important raw material skyrocketed. They were now trapped in a protected premium market, forced to buy steel at prices their global competitors in Germany or Japan were not paying. The policy designed to protect American steel had just declared an economic war on American steel consumers. This was not a minor inconvenience. It was not a rounding error on a balance sheet. It was a fundamental, structural shift in their entire cost of production. In its own annual reports, Deere & Company repeatedly warned its investors, in the dry language of corporate filings, about the immense pressure of rising raw material costs. Those costs, now embedded in every piece of steel, had to go somewhere. When a manufacturer's costs go up, they have only 2 choices. 1, absorb the cost, watch their profits vanish, and slowly lose market share to foreign competitors who don't have this burden. 2, pass that cost on to the customer. For American farmers, the result was immediate and painful. Let's look at the data. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics tracks the Producer Price Index, or PPI. This is what it costs to build things. Over the 24-month period from 2022 to 2024, the PPI for farm machinery has surged by nearly 22%. This isn't just inflation. It's a direct consequence of policy. This is a crippling price hike for a farmer who is already struggling, a farmer whose fuel costs have risen, whose fertilizer costs have spiked, and who, as we covered in our last report, has just lost his biggest export market for soybeans due to China's retaliatory tariffs. The policy had backed America's industrial giant into a corner. John Deere, an American icon for over 180 years, now faced a critical, company-defining choice. It could continue to buy protected, high-priced American steel, build its tractors in America, and pass that 22% hike onto its customers, farmers who were already on the brink of bankruptcy. It could absorb the crippling cost and risk becoming uncompetitive on the global stage. Or it could find a way, a loophole, a backdoor, to escape the tariffs entirely. The green tractor exodus. So what did John Deere do? They didn't just absorb the cost, they moved. Now, to be clear, this wasn't a sudden decision. Like all global corporations, John Deere has had operations in Mexico for decades. But the tariffs, the 2024 steel tariffs, provided the final, powerful financial push. This was no longer a long-term strategy. It was an immediate economic necessity. The move was precise and strategic. According to detailed reports from Reuters and the Des Moines Register, John Deere announced it was moving production of its popular 5 and 6 series tractors. These are not small garden tools. These are the 100-plus horsepower workhorses of medium-sized farms across North America. And their production was being moved from the company's flagship factory, the historic Waterloo Works in Iowa, to a brand new state-of-the-art facility in Monterrey, Mexico. But this decision raises the critical question: why Mexico? If the problem is high-priced American steel, why not just move all production to Asia or Europe, where steel is cheaper? The answer is perhaps the most brilliant and most cynical part of this entire story. The answer is another U.S. trade deal, the USMCA, the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. This deal, which replaced NAFTA, was championed by the same administration that implemented the steel tariffs. It was sold as a new era for North American manufacturing, and buried deep in its thousands of pages, it contained the perfect loophole for John Deere. Here is the critical irony. Pay close attention, because this is the core of the dilemma. The U.S. steel tariffs applied to raw steel imported into the United States. They did not apply to raw steel imported into Mexico. This is point one. Point two, under the new rules of origin in the USMCA, John Deere could now import cheaper steel from the global market, from Korea, from Japan, from Germany, and ship it directly into their new plant in Monterrey, paying no U.S. tariffs. They could completely bypass the protected, high-priced American steel market they were trapped in. Point three, they would then assemble the entire tractor in Mexico. And this is the final, crucial step, because that finished tractor, built in Mexico with global steel, easily meets the regional value content rules of the USMCA. It is officially classified as a North American product. This classification means John Deere could then ship that finished tractor back across the border from Mexico into the United States, paying 0 tariffs on the steel and 0 tariffs on the tractor. It was a brilliant and perfectly legal and corporate maneuver. They used one U.S. trade agreement, the USMCA, to completely neutralize another U.S. trade policy, the steel tariffs. The policy designed to stop foreign steel from entering the U.S. had failed. It had simply created a corporate detour through Mexico. While American steel producers celebrated their protected, high-margin market, John Deere was busy re-engineering its entire supply chain to cut them out of the loop. The new plants in Mexico, like the one in Monterrey and another in Ramos Arizpe, are not small, token assembly lines. They are massive, technologically advanced facilities. The Monterrey plant alone is a multi-million-dollar investment. They are strategically positioned to be supplied by global ports, not just American steel mills. According to official company statements, this move was part of a supply chain optimization. It was a necessary step to improve cost efficiencies. In plain English, it means it was cheaper. It was cheaper first because the labor costs in Mexico are significantly lower than union-scale wages in Iowa. And most importantly, it was cheaper because they were no longer forced to buy high-priced, tariff-protected American steel. While factories in the Midwest faced rising costs and an uncertain future, the factories in Monterrey were booming. But all that new equipment, all those iconic green tractors being built in Mexico, had to go somewhere. And their primary market was right back where they started, the American Heartland. Section 3, the double bind. This single corporate decision, this optimization, created two distinct sets of victims. If the American factory worker was hit first, the American farmer was hit second, and the farmer, none, was hit twice. Let's first look at the worker. For decades, towns like Waterloo, Iowa, and Moline, Illinois, were not just locations for John Deere. They were John Deere. The promise of a good-paying, stable, union manufacturing job was the foundation of the entire community. It paid for the mortgages, it funded the schools, it built the middle class. When John Deere announced the full move of its 5 and 6 series tractor production from Waterloo, it wasn't just a line item on a balance sheet, it was an earthquake. In the past 24 months, that Waterloo factory has seen multiple rounds of layoffs. The Waterloo Courier, a local paper, has documented the cuts. Hundreds of jobs gone. In Moline, Illinois, the company moved its Harvester Works headquarters to a smaller facility. The company, of course, calls this restructuring and right-sizing. But these aren't just statistics. These are families who have worked at that plant for 3 generations. These are communities. These are towns built for generations around these factories that now watch as jobs and the tax revenue that funds their schools and roads move south. And here's the most bitter irony of all. The steel tariffs, which were explicitly sold to these workers as a policy to protect their jobs, had effectively signed their layoff notices. By making it too expensive to build in America, the policy didn't save their jobs. It exported them. But the pain did not stop at the factory gate. It spread like a shock wave out into the fields. If the worker was hit first, the farmer was hit second. And, as we've established, they were hit from 2 directions at once. This is the double bind. First, as we saw in our previous investigation, the farmer was hit by retaliation. When the U.S. imposed its tariffs, China retaliated with pinpoint precision. They stopped buying American agricultural goods, most notably soybeans. This cutoff evaporated the farmer's single largest and most profitable market, sending commodity prices plummeting. As the American Farm Bureau Federation reported, this trade war drove farm bankruptcies to their highest levels in a decade. So the farmer's income collapsed. That was the first blow. The second blow came from their own suppliers. While their income was collapsing, their costs were exploding. The same steel tariffs that drove John Deere to Mexico also drove up the price of all farm equipment, whether it was made here or not. That 22% rise in the producer price index wasn't theoretical. It was passed directly to the farmer at the dealership. And here is the final twist in this economic tragedy. Even though John Deere was now building its 5 series tractors in Mexico with cheaper steel and cheaper labor, they did not pass those savings on to the farmer. The company didn't lower its prices. Why would it? The goal was not to save the farmer money. The goal was to protect its own profit margins from the damage caused by the U.S. tariffs. The farmer is now paying a tariff tax on the very equipment they need to harvest crops that they can no longer sell to their biggest market. They are trapped. They are being squeezed from all sides. This entire policy framework was presented as America first. But when an iconic American company like John Deere moves production to Mexico specifically to avoid U.S. tariffs, who is really winning? Is this just smart business? Or is it a structural betrayal of the American worker and farmer? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Conclusion: the spike in the flywheel. The John Deere dilemma reveals a fundamental and perhaps fatal flaw in the 2025 trade war. It shows what happens when a simple policy is applied to a complex global economy. The U.S. trade war intended to protect American manufacturing, created a perverse incentive structure. It did not just fail to protect jobs, it actively accelerated the hollowing out of iconic American industry by forcing companies like John Deere to move production to Mexico to remain competitive, ultimately betraying the very workers and farmers the policy claimed to defend. The final irony is this: the policy didn't just fail to protect American jobs, it unintentionally financed their relocation by making it too expensive for them to stay home. But John Deere's move to Mexico wasn't just about tariffs. It wasn't just about labor costs. It was also about control. In our next video, we will investigate how this manufacturing shift connects directly to the intensifying right-to-repair battle. We will explore what it means for farmers when they can no longer fix their own equipment, and how moving production is part of a larger strategy to control the entire agricultural supply chain, from the factory floor to the farmer's field. Subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss it.